Gossipnista here, your one and only source into the real lives of New Yorkers and what it's like to live in New York City. So is it all glitz and glamour? Where do you start? What should you know? And who am I? I'll tell you everything you need to know, and you'll thank me for it. XOXO Gossipnista. Hey everyone, welcome to the first ever episode of the Gossipnista podcast. On today's show, we have a very special guest. Many would consider him a staple of New York City. I know I do. He's the founder and creator of the widely known and popular Instagram account @SubwayCreatures with nearly 2 million followers, which documents all things odd, crazy, and funny that happen in the underground world of the New York City subway. I'm excited to introduce Rick McGuire.
Thank you so much for having me. I actually heard through the grapevine this is your first video podcast.
It is.
So
you're a pro.
I'm honored.
I'm honored to have you here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to kind of just give a little overview of how we're going to just take this podcast today, and with the intention of first starting off and finding out about you and your New York story, and then diving into the creation of Subway Creatures, and finally, lastly, kind of go into giving tips for New Yorkers in the subway, how to navigate
absolutely.
that, right?
That sounds great.
Because you're an expert on that. So just go ahead, Rick, and please let us know, are you a New Yorker? Are you born here? Where are you coming from? Tell us your story.
So I've been a New Yorker for the last 10 plus years. I wound up moving here right into Hell's Kitchen. I've kind of jumped around since I've been here. I'm originally from New Jersey, but only about 10, 15 minutes outside the Lincoln Tunnel.
You took that into the city?
So that's exactly what I was doing. I was working in production as a producer in the city, and each day I was commuting, taking the bus in. But I also grew up, almost in the city because I was so close to it. So, I kind of feel like I definitely have ties to it, even though I'm not from here officially.
It's right outside the neighborhood.
It's right here.
Yeah.
But, I moved into the city in 2010 and
nearly 10 years.
It's just about 10 years. And then I was seeing all this stuff in the subway, doing that commute every day. And this is way before Instagram or a lot of these social media platforms came along.
Right.
And I kind of noticed, as most of us in New York notice the crazy, bizarre things, almost just as you said, that happen in the subway. And I was doing Google searches, trying to find out if any of this stuff actually exists in one main place.
Okay.
And I realized it didn't. So I was like, this could be an opportunity, and it was just really it started as a hobby. It was just like, there needs to be a way that I can show my family and friends, all the
craziness,
the stuff that I'm witnessing, as we're going. And so I started a website, and almost a couple months to a year after that, Instagram came along.
Perfect.
And I was just like, okay, well, here we have a great platform for this. And it was it was perfect. If you remember, Instagram only started as photos.
Yes.
There was no videos, so I was, limited to what I could actually put on there. But it evolved as all these social media platforms do. And before you know it, there's videos, and now there's Instagram TV, and it's perfect for what I'm trying to do.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So Instagram helped a lot in growing Subway Creatures.
It
obviously
absolutely did. I mean, there really wasn't an audience in the beginning. It was just one of those situations where you have to use a lot of hashtags to build an audience. And I do tell a lot of people this. I was very fortunate to get into that whole Instagram world before Facebook came and bought them out. Because once Facebook did, that's when they started instituting all the algorithms and I don't know
what goes on behind those algorithms. The question
you
would know.
Who actually? I don't even know. I don't think a lot of people know. They don't make that public because they don't want people to be able to beat those algorithms.
Right.
But what I can tell you is I was there before it. So the audience, you are actually reaching 100% of your audience when you were posting.
Yes.
Whereas now, I forget the exact percentage, but you only reach a percentage of your audience.
Okay.
because what they want to do is they want people to have to pay to boost their posts.
Yeah.
And, it's another way for them to make money.
Exactly.
So I was there before that, which really helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember I actually still to this day have the newspaper framed in my bedroom.
I actually researched this.
This is good. Tell me.
This was, a monumental thing in a sense, right? It kind of shifted everything.
It was the tipping point for the account, I like to call it. Yeah.
And when the New York Post
New York Post came along, and I was like, wait, you want to do a story on my account?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even understand, why they wanted to do that, but there was a I believe it was a photo of a guy just peeing right off the platform onto the train tracks. Yeah. So I posted that picture, and
that's nothing in comparison to what's out there
now.
To
be honest with you, that's pretty tame.
Is it?
That's pretty tame for for what, at least for what people see in the subway. I ask a lot of people all the time, what's the craziest thing you've seen? And, that's probably one of the number one answers. And even though it is the craziest thing they've seen, so many people have seen it that it starts becoming like almost a regular
you're
occurrence.
Desensitized from it.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is a huge problem for me. I've become so desensitized for everything on my account that I actually sometimes have to take a step back, and I have to say, all right, even though I don't think that this is crazy or, strange, what would a regular New Yorker, a regular person say? And
they're astonished by it. They're like, oh my gosh, I never see this. Give me more. Right. But back to your New York Post article.
Right. So back to that. So the New York Post article, they wind up, it was going to be an online piece.
Okay.
And I was so excited because they're name dropping.
Yeah.
They're actually doing a little bit of a backstory on me.
Great.
Which I was not expecting, because they originally just said they wanted to talk about subway creatures, and then all of a sudden they're asking me all these personal questions, and that becomes part of the story as well. And all of a sudden, you know how the news always kind of copies off of each other. So then that online article does so well that the New York Post decides to do an actual thing in the paper,
spread.
like a whole spread in the paper.
Okay.
And I was like, whoa, this is actually getting bigger. And then, there's radio shows that start reaching out to me, and then other news outlets. And before you know it, it was almost like a 24-hour frenzy.
Wow.
That died down kind of quick after.
Okay.
However, the press had kind of gotten out there quick enough where all of a sudden the audience just started snowballing as far as followers go on the account. To be honest, I couldn't even tell you what the numbers were, where I was before and then after. But I could tell you that they were big enough to kind of be, like I said, that tipping point for the account. And after that, the other thing that helped.
So when was this article written?
This article,
2014?
I think 15, it was either 15? 13, 14.
Okay.
Could have even been 15.
Okay.
Which I know that's huge range, but that's kind of, so much has happened with this that, everything kind of mushes together for me. But that was the big one. And, I really saw the numbers start to increase after that. Which was huge, and the other thing that I was just going to say that really helped was that there's no, there wasn't anything else really like it. So it's not like I was competing against anyone. I was competing against myself. And that helped because now when people found things, instead of sending them into, all these other accounts that may not necessarily be relevant to what they're seeing in the subway, let's send it to Subway Creatures because we know that that'll actually get posted there because that's what they do.
Okay.
And I think that was another big thing that helped.
So you're kind of mentioning in regards to you posting on Subway Creatures, you initially started creating the content for it. And did it change at some point in regards to people sending things in?
Yeah, it did. And that was another thing right off the bat that kind of blew me away because, like I said, I was doing this as a hobby. So I was, kind of taking pictures and videos of my own stuff. I also, just to get content out there, I was finding stuff on Google.
Okay.
And I was putting that on there as well, just to kind of get the ball rolling. And then before I knew it, there were strangers, people I didn't even know. Because, especially right off the bat, you can imagine it was friends and family that were following the account, not necessarily random people.
Yeah,
And that's all I really wanted to do. I was just trying to put something together to show my friends and family.
It's always
amazing. And it was like a hobby.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, as things go viral, all of a sudden now there's strangers sending me stuff. There's people commenting on videos that I didn't even know. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool.
They're demanding more.
And then all of a sudden people start sending me content, and I was like, wow, this is even better, because now people are sending me content. I don't even have to go out and find stuff anymore.
Right. So it makes your job a lot easier, but
it makes it easier, but it also, at least to this point, has made it a full-time job, because you can only imagine how much content comes in on a daily basis, and it's.
I would love to see that content, please.
I'll absolutely be able to show you. It's pretty wild, and I have said in the past, you never know when you wake up and you start opening up DMs and emails what you're gonna get. It honestly could be anything. It could be stuff you don't actually want to see, but you have to look at it to know if it's worthy of going on the account or not.
I mean, you mentioned other people. What's the craziest thing they've seen? I want to know, what's the craziest thing that you feel you've posted, seen, maybe didn't post?
Yeah. So there was definitely, oh God, I don't
There's
know
so much.
There is a lot. There was one that I was trying to figure out, that we showed on my podcast, which was a guy who pulled his pants down and was rubbing his ass on one of the poles.
Oh my God.
And he was making these absolutely ridiculous noises.
Whoa. Tell me he wasn't.
I don't know what the end game was there.
Good.
But it was happening.
Okay.
And someone, thankfully, we all have phones these days, was sitting there documenting it. And that is by far one of the wildest. I mean, there's this very, I don't want to say, there's kind of a large crowd that actually, they like having sex on the trains.
Wow.
And you'd think that that's probably one of the most disgusting things that you could think of. It happens more often than you'd think. And those videos also get sent to me.
Okay.
And again, you're just sitting, and a lot of the time there are other people around, and there's this thing that New Yorkers, they just mind their own business. They keep their head down.
They don't even see it.
The earphones in. Yeah. They're on their phones, and even if they see it, they act like they don't. Yeah, it's wild. Gosh. And there is some kind of phenomenon that is with the daily New Yorker that just. They keep their eyes down. And sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes that's a bad thing, because sometimes you miss a lot of the great things that the world offers,
100%. I'm kind of that person that goes on the subway, just has the headphones up and looks at the ads, or just like into space, right? I feel like a zombie going in and out, never looking around. And everything you just mentioned right now, I'm sure the audience back at home is listening, if they're not familiar with subway creatures, or if they're thinking of New York or coming to New York, or they're like, am I to expect this in New York? Like, what the,
Well, it's funny you say that, because I get all these DMs every day, and there's actually a lot of DMs where people don't even send content. They either have, really nice things to say, or they give feedback. And one of the things that I get often is people outside the tri-state area who actually say that when they've seen the page and they come to New York, one of the things, they want to see the Statue of Liberty, they want to see the Empire State Building, and they want to find subway creatures in the subway. Like, it's actually like a destination for them when they get here.
Of course.
And I always respond, I'm like, that's great. Be careful what you wish for, because when you get down there, not only is it not stuff that you want to see, but you're not necessarily always going to see the stuff, because then they'll always respond after that.
Okay.
I never saw anything. Where are all these creatures that I...
And that's a question. So, I mean, after all these years of having subway creatures, getting content and it coming from various places, people maybe don't tell you what train it happened on. Maybe you do know, but is there a livelier area than others where people can potentially just hop on the one train, the L train? Like,
yes. For those people coming from out of town, I recommend going to Union Square. That is one of the hot spots. Union Square is honestly, it's Ringling Brothers.
Oh my
it
gosh.
is a circus.
Is it?
It's in the subway and outside the subway because outside the subway is a park, and then there's this huge pavilion, and it just brings every walk of life there, and they're the most
lively.
It's the most lively area, I would say. But you can also find some talent down there as well.
Okay.
It's not, there's people who can really sing.
100%.
There's some people who, all right, so here's an example. Yeah. There's a guy who does a headstand and solves a Rubik's Cube, and he just sits there and does it. He has done it in the subway, but he also does it in the park in Union Square. But that's just, you're walking through a park and all of a sudden you see a guy doing a headstand, solving a Rubik's Cube. I mean, that's one example. That's a tip of the iceberg when you're over there. But that, and also I would say Times Square is just a hub. It's because I think it's so large, and it's also another place where these buskers know that tourists are going to be.
They like to shock them.
It's basically, they're like, I'll make the most money if I go where the most people are. So they kind of set up shop around there as well. And those are probably two of the most prevalent areas of quote-unquote subway creatures.
Awesome. So now everyone knows where to stop when they come into the city.
Recommend it,
if they're not already on the city seeing crazy stuff. But so as we're talking about this, and we're talking subway creatures, where did the name, come from, right?
So I wanted something where I was thinking, okay, if you're scrolling through and you see a name, what will kind of stand out? Okay. And you'll be like, I need to know more about that. So that was part of it. And then it was also, it just fit. Like it seemed so appropriate for what was happening. And I know sometimes there can be like a negative connotation that comes with it because like people are like, I don't want to be a creature. But what I think that has happened over a long period of time of doing this is that people are starting to realize that it's just a title and it doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. Right. There are also good things that I've put on the account, and it's more about things that are relevant to the subway and less about the name per se. Right. So I think people have kind of let that slide a little bit, but at the beginning that was kind of a challenge because people were actually finding, and they still do. I can post something, and I swear to God, within 24 hours, the person will find themselves on the account.
Do they?
Oh,
people actually find themselves all the time?
All of the time.
So do you think they're doing it purposely to be captured, to get on subway creatures?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Okay. Because sometimes they're like, I take it down. Take it down. Okay. I don't want to be on it. And I do think that there kind of is an ethical side of things, and I really try to do my best. I don't want to exploit the homeless. Okay. You don't want to exploit the mentally ill. Right. There are certain situations where if someone is so vulnerable, you don't necessarily want to put them on blast and make fun of them. Yeah. And again, the point of the account is not necessarily to make fun of people. It's just kind of like everyone saying, oh my God, I've been that person before. It's relatable. Right. And a lot of people are like, I've been in that situation before, or I've seen that person before, or my friend, hey, do you remember? And then they tag their friends or their family. They're like, do you remember when we were on the train and that happened to us? Or we were those people who, were doing that. And, every once in a while, there is a little bit of shaming as of this recording. Okay. This morning I posted something of a guy clipping his toenails on the train. Did you? Okay, now I missed that one. Now that's I honestly I posted it while I was on the train walking I'm like, in here.
I'm on top of it.
Yeah, I just had to get the content out there. But that's an example of someone where I feel like if you don't want to be on the page, don't be clipping your toenails on the train. Okay. It's just you're putting yourself in a spot where it's gonna happen. Don't do it.
Where people should be aware that that's happening, so they're aware of the dirty.
There's also instances where people will wear crazy costumes onto the train. Okay. Or they'll do ridiculous things on the train, and they're bringing attention to themselves, and then all of a sudden they turn around and say, well, I don't want to be. It's like you need to be self-aware while you're on the train. And that's why I say people who are in a vulnerable position, you don't necessarily want to, put on blast. Like the person who's sleeping, with their mouth open, or
that would be me.
And that would be so many of us. But
mostly on airplanes, but
but you also don't want to the person's just sleeping on their commute home. Who knows? Maybe they just worked a 18-hour shift at work.
Right.
You don't want to put someone on blast like that because you don't necessarily know the whole backstory.
But you probably could have a whole scroll of.
You could. You absolutely could do a whole thing on that. But that's why it's important for me to pick and choose what goes on there and be selective, because you mainly want to go after the people who are either doing something intentionally to bring attention to themselves, or they're going out of their way. Maybe they're not trying to bring attention to themselves, but they indirectly are because they're wearing a mask or a costume. Yeah. It's like,
it just screams.
You got to know at this point, and especially with the fact that everyone owns a cell phone, you're going to wind up on the page if you're doing something ridiculous on the train. Right.
So it seemed through hearing all this that you started Subway Creatures, you had this good intention, right, of just sharing content with family members. Right. It grew into this huge thing. It started in 2010.
Yes.
And again, the intention now, has it evolved? I just heard
it has evolved. Yeah. And that's a great question, because it actually started not necessarily in the greatest way, because I didn't have guidelines.
Okay.
And
so you learned.
I learned. And I just posted anything that I was coming across. Yeah. I was posting homeless people. I was posting, and I was getting feedback from people, obviously negative feedback. And also I want to say constructive criticism from even like family members who were like, they were saying, hey, that's probably not in the best taste. And, I love the page, probably should do less. And I started realizing, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, these aren't just pictures and videos. These are people. And some of these people don't have many options. They have to be sleeping in the subway. Yeah. And, you don't want to exploit those situations. I think that there's a fine line between, and this is probably one of the most popular comments I get, even to this day. Okay. The New Yorkers are a different breed from people.
Please tell me about New Yorkers.
So New Yorkers, there are a lot of people who just do things for attention, or they do them, because they grew up in New York. And a lot of people, their immediate response is mentally ill. This person's mentally ill.
Okay.
And, I obviously, like I said, I try to do my best to decipher between the mentally ill and someone who's just doing something for attention.
Okay.
A good amount of the time, people are just doing it for attention. Wow. They're either asking for money or they just literally just want attention from people on the train. And immediate response from anyone outside of New York is, you're just exploiting the mentally ill. And I'm saying, well, actually, there's a lot of performance artists that get onto the train. And even though they come off as mentally ill, I've met them. I've talked to them. Right. These people aren't mentally ill. They're quote unquote artists, or there's some form of art that they're doing where they're trying to draw attention. They're not mentally ill. So it's hard to kind of get that message across.
How does someone who's new to the city or who doesn't really understand what's going on when they may come across Subway Creatures distinguish, if this is...
It is very hard, especially for someone coming, from out of town. It's honestly, and this sounds funny, but you have to almost ride the train or be in New York for a certain amount of time before you... And I don't even know how long that time is. Yeah. It's just... you have to experience it to really understand that if you're calling that person mentally ill, then probably 85% of New York is mentally ill. Yeah. And obviously those numbers don't match up. So it's even hard for me sometimes.
Yeah, you just have to write it, and
even
you
if
have
it's
to
in
live it.
Yeah, and even if it is, if it's even in question, I try to stay away from it. You know, you don't want to exploit those people. But
100%.
Going back to your question about evolving, it did start off that way. And, I've really, through posting and hearing criticism and feedback, I've really learned what works, what doesn't work for the most part. And then kind of came, it started getting to a size where I was saying to myself, all right, we got to start kind of taking this to the next stage. And I wound up starting a podcast about a year ago.
Okay. Subway Creatures.
Subway Creatures podcast. We were in a studio kind of very similar to this.
Okay.
Where it was a video podcast, which was important because it was kind of a visually driven show. And it was, right off the bat, it did very well.
Awesome.
And then, the numbers kind of started to level out a little bit. And I don't even know if I told you this, but as of this recording, I think it was 2 days ago.
Wait, are you dropping news here?
Yes. This is breaking news that no one's heard yet on this show.
I'm so honored.
Yeah.
What's going on?
It's unfortunately not the greatest news, but
No.
this could be something that is in the long term good because I am a big believer in everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
But the network canceled the podcast. Which the network that I was on canceled the podcast.
Okay.
Which I actually have to put something out soon.
So you were with a network and
Correct.
no longer with them.
Right. And they were the ones producing the show for me. It just turned out they had too many shows on the network and ours was one of the newest ones. So I think it was one of those situations where it was like, all right, he's only had the show for 12 months and we have these other shows that we think are going to do better right now.
It's crazy.
We
You're so valuable.
We don't have the studio time. So, it was kind of like a little trimming of the fat. But, I think that, like I said, everything happens for a reason. And, I think that something hopefully better and bigger will come of it.
Absolutely.
And I think it also gives me a second to take a step back and say, all right, what was working, what wasn't working, or what was working, what wasn't working, and how can we, get an audience that's actually going to tune in? Because, the podcast world, there's a billion podcasts. So you really got to give people a reason to listen to yours.
Of course.
And I'm learning that. And podcasts are new to me. Within the last year, I didn't know much, if anything, about podcasts.
But you created so much content during the time. I mean, some of the interviews that you had on there, one of my favorite is episode 53, and people can still go there and listen, right? I mean, onto the iTunes,
it is.
And it's with Jerry O'Connell.
Oh my God, he was one of my favorite
Tell
guests.
me about it. Yeah,
we had him on. He actually, he's not only a follower, but he comments.
No way.
He comments a lot.
And he's a born New Yorker as well.
He is. Yeah, he is. So he had stories to tell. But I reached out to him. I was like, hey, long shot. Do you want to do this? He goes, oh my God, I am so in.
That's amazing.
And I was very flattered when he came on because he was awesome. He had so many stories and experiences being on the subway.
Right.
With not only as a kid growing up in New York City, but with his family as of now because he was in the city filling in for Wendy Williams doing her talk show
recently.
So this was a great opportunity for us to get him on the show.
Right.
And he was just such a nice guy. And, it's always good getting those native New Yorkers on because they have so many relatable stories that 100%. They can tell you.
100%.
And even the stories that you're just like, wow. You're like, I can't believe that happened to you. And
yes. I mean, and you need to go to listen to it on your podcast, episode 53. It's hilarious. He shares stories about the one train and his daughter in sandals and flip-flops on the train.
The punchline to that is so great.
It was I loved
so
it.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah. And we have a bunch of guests like that. Obviously, as you just mentioned, we're not recording anymore. However, it still lives on iTunes.
It's available.
So you can go out and at least hear it. As most of the episodes are on, or a good number are on YouTube.
On YouTube, okay.
So you could definitely check those out as well. But even if you can't see, like one of the things that we realize is that people will be listening.
Right.
So we try to do a good job of describing things, and also you're hearing a lot of stories. So it still works just audio wise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you were to give an overall description of what people can expect and hear from the podcast, what would you say?
So what we do on a weekly basis is a weekly show. We try to definitely get subway content in there. We talk about some of the news from the subway. There's definitely you hear the stories that you hear that we've done interviews. There's some really good heartfelt stuff. There was a guy who there was a homeless man walking through the train, and he's actually a kid. He was only like 22, 23 years old.
Okay.
And he took the shoes off of his own feet and gave them to the homeless guy, not knowing he was being recorded.
Aww.
And that video got sent into me. I posted it. It went super viral because obviously everyone loves these great
They're
stories.
heartfelt,
And so we wound up we tracked the guy down. We got him on the show.
Wow.
He was able to tell his story, his upbringing, and how it brought him to that point of him taking his shoes off. And then, so what we did was then we brought in a shoe company and we said, go to their store and you can have whatever you want for doing such a good deed.
Okay.
And that actually spawned into working with another company that actually gives shoes to homeless people.
Okay.
And these are the things why I love.
Wow.
I love the podcast. It's just it spawned into so many good things. But there are stories like that. There's another story. We had a guy on who actually ran down onto the subway tracks and rescued a person.
Someone had fell into
someone unfortunately was they might have been mentally ill. They might have been suicidal. They were laying down on the tracks crying. They just wanted to die.
Oh my God.
Which is really upsetting.
Yeah.
But this, again, another kid. His kid was only like 22, 21 years old. He ran down and without even thinking, jumped onto the tracks, picked this guy up, put him onto the platform.
You have to have so much adrenaline to just like do
that's
that
exactly
and
what
pick
he was
people
running
up.
off of.
And I mean, I think about like those tracks all the time. When I'm looking at them, I'm like, how hard would it be to get out of there?
Well, you know what a lot of people don't realize is how high the platform is off the tracks. It's a little deceiving because it doesn't look that high. It's honestly almost a 5.5 to 6 foot jump onto the platform. So you really have to pull yourself up. And if you're picking a person up, just think about how much harder that is.
I can't.
But we had him on the show to talk about his experience, and we showed the video, and you hear these stories from these people, and as much as I think a lot of New Yorkers get a bad rap for being people who don't care. It's so good and relieving to hear that there are so many good people out there that would help and do this. There was a story last week. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to it because the show got canceled before we could highlight it. But there were two men who saved a little girl who, unfortunately, her father jumped in front of a train holding her. She's a 5-year-old girl.
Oh my goodness.
He died. Somehow, miraculously, she did not even have a scratch on her.
Wow.
She was under the train, and these two guys jumped down, and they went under the train and got her out.
That is crazy. Like, this is for real?
Unfortunately, this is for real. There's video of it because the platform, it was during rush hour, and the platform was pretty crowded. And unfortunately, most of those people, including the girl, are all going to be, this is something that's going to unfortunately burn in their memories.
I think
But the fact that she's now okay and safe, that was a terrible situation. But again, I'm
just in disbelief of all these things that you're kind of sharing. It's so humbling, the stories that you did share with the guy in the shoes, and it's also so much disbelief in this incident that just recently happened. I feel like there needs to be more awareness in regards to these type of incidents, and you kind of sharing them sheds light on it. But overall, New York City, MTA, just more awareness.
And actually that's a good point because another thing that's happened, which is a good thing in my mind, is the accounts become so big that the media follows my account as well. So a lot of the time they don't hear about this stuff until it's on my account. And I'm not even saying that in a bragging or boasting way.
You've literally become the official, unofficial MTA go-to subway, expert.
Because like I said, there's nothing else like it out there where that content's going necessarily. So I actually have contacts from, almost all of the media sources in New York. And as soon as I post something, they immediately text me and they say, Rick, we need the who, what, when, why of this story. Can you put us in touch with the person who sent it to you? And before you know it, because of the viral world that we live in, that news is on the 6 o'clock story. That story is on the 6 o'clock news, and it had just gone up on my account that afternoon.
Wow!
And it brings awareness to a lot of this stuff, which otherwise wouldn't necessarily be documented. And it's the good stories. There are the bad that come with it. but there are a lot of good stories that come with it as well.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, even more important.
Right. Well, thanks for shedding light on that.
Oh, absolutely.
As well as dropping the news regarding, your podcast, which is great news in the sense that you are free and open to start new and create more things like this or however you like to take it. So that's an exciting thing.
Absolutely.
And aside from the podcast, which was something you were working on, you also have this other page, right? What is New York, that takes things from underground up to the street level.
Yeah,
Can you tell us about that?
I'm actually glad you brought that up because anytime I do a podcast or any kind of interview, obviously the main focus is on subway creatures, and rightfully so. But this is another one of my little babies, as I like to call them, that I started
amazing one.
Because what happened was people were sending me all of this content to subway creatures that wasn't happening in the subway.
Okay.
And I was saying, I can't use this because it's not in the subway, it's off brand. Well, I have all this content. I might as well start another page.
So define what is New York.
So what is New York is another social media page. It's basically exactly subway creatures, but out of the subway.
Yeah.
And again, it's drawing attention to a lot of things where people are doing things almost intentionally. Basically the same idea behind subway creatures for what is New York. And personally, I feel like that has more potential than subway creatures.
Okay.
Granted, it's only a little over a year old,
but it's got like nearly 300K followers, right?
And so it's definitely big. I just feel like it has so much more potential because you're not stuck in the subway. There's so much more that happens outside of the subway. You're on the
underworld. You're on the top world.
Right.
You got a podcast going. Okay, that's
right. And again, there's not necessarily anything that's really out there. At least there's a couple accounts, but for the most part, this is the one where, again, the news comes to me, the news sources, when they see stuff posted on there, which I love being able to either help, because another thing that I didn't even mention at the last question was that I have a relationship with the NYPD.
Oh, wow.
For both accounts.
Do you?
Where, I'm not a snitch.
Okay.
I got to make that very clear. I'm not a snitch. However, there are certain, and I told the NYPD I will help them with certain situations because I have the following I do and because the majority of the audience is New York based.
Right.
Every once in a while, they will want help finding people or tracking people down. And when I say finding people, it's not necessarily criminals. A lot of the time, and this is another common thing that it isn't in the news as much, there's either, autistic or mentally ill or just people with dementia who wander off. Right. And the last time they were seen was on the A train or the J train and they say, hey, can you kind of just put this out there if anyone's seen them, we need to track this person down before they either hurt themselves or they get hurt.
Right.
So I definitely try to help with scenarios like that. I try to think, what if my sister were
100%.
to wander off and, it's good to know that that's out there. However, you have to be careful because then what happens, and this always happens, then all of a sudden you just get everyone, hey, I lost my dog. Can you find, and it's like, well, no, I don't want to turn into that kind of a page where every day I'm posting 3 or 4 posts looking for people or things. But, you really kind of have to, again, pick and choose because you also don't want it to be like, oh, looking for this guy who robbed a store or this guy who broke into a car.
That's not like subway creatures. That's
it's not on brand necessarily. And there was an instance where there was a guy who assaulted an old woman on the train.
Oh, wow.
And for whatever reason,
they
especially the day that this happened, they recorded themselves doing it. And that's it's the world we live in now. I don't even know why these people are so dumb. So the video got out and the police asked me, they're like, listen, it's an old woman getting beat up on the train. Like, can you, so I reposted that. I'm not saying it was because of me.
Right.
But because this video was all over the place, but within 24 hours, the guy was caught. And it was almost like a social media justice,
that's great.
Thing, which
because
was
you posted
great.
It and everyone was on the lookout in a sense.
Yeah, and again, I'm not even saying it was because of me. I'm just saying like social media being used for that kind of good, I think is a great thing. And, I definitely try to use it for that reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, being associated with the NYPD, and sharing these tips, that's very helpful. Now, in regards to the MTA, do you have any collaboration, or have they ever reached out to you regarding subway creatures? What's the story there? I've always been curious to kind of know. Can you not comment?
I'm curious myself because, to be honest, no one's ever reached out to me.
Okay.
The only thing that they do is they're whoever runs their Twitter, which I have no idea who it is.
Okay.
If I post a video of water leaking through the ceiling or something along those lines, they'll reach out and say, hey, can you let us know what car this was? We obviously need to take it out of service, or we need to find out what's wrong with it. Other than that, though, no one's ever reached out to me. You'd have to think that they know about the page.
Yeah, obviously.
Because people tag them and stuff that I post all the time, and they say
and just
figure
the fact
this
that
out,
they
fix
know
it.
and they're not doing anything is a great thing, because that means they like it, right?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say
like
that.
it,
I think that they know that there's not much they can necessarily do.
Right. It's valuable.
It is, and I'm not trying to put down the MTA. I'm not trying to exploit them, but there are some issues that need to be addressed sometimes.
Right.
And I have to think, even
what
though
issues are those?
Yeah, where do we start?
Really?
That could be its own podcast.
Oh wow, there you
go.
But
let's just start with the fare going up. That's
how much was it before? Yeah, I'm fairly new to the city.
Yeah, so right now it's $2.75, unless it's gone up since we started this podcast, which it feels like that happens all the time.
What was it before?
They do it in sometimes small increments.
Okay.
So that way people don't make a big deal about it. But at the same time, those increments start happening.
Yeah.
A lot.
Okay.
A lot closer to each other. So I want to say maybe even a year and a half ago, it was like $2.25.
Wow.
And again, it's not that big of a jump, but it does start adding up.
Yeah.
It does start adding up,
Yeah.
especially for the New Yorker who's taking the subways, so many times a day. And listen, there's a lot to be said about, the subway system. It's the oldest in the world.
Yeah.
And it's actually one of the most efficient, believe it or not.
Okay.
It's one of the most efficient. So you have to give credit where credit's due. I think that there are certain scenarios, though, where it's, how things are handled that really, need to be addressed.
Okay.
There was there was something that happened within the past few months. This video went super viral. It was a man who was almost washed off the subway platform because of wall of water.
Where did the water come from?
Exactly. So New York had really bad flooding that day. And what happened was they were doing construction on a building that was built above one of the subway platforms.
Okay.
So there was a makeshift wall that was covered in plywood.
Okay.
And apparently the construction workers didn't have any way of filtering water. So the water was just pooling in this construction site to the point where finally the plywood wall in the subway gave out and this wall of water
just broke.
Came. And again, I'm kind of happy someone was filming, but this is such a wild video. There was a man standing right in front of the wall.
Okay.
And when the wall collapsed, the water took him right off his feet.
Okay.
Started washing him towards the train tracks as a train was coming in.
Oh my goodness, I can't.
I know, it's stressful when you watch the video, but thankfully he stopped right before the train
he
would have hit him. Yeah. But the video it almost looked like a scene out of a movie. Wow. It was so wild. But he was okay.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Good.
But it raised a lot of questions. How can this happen? And so I posted that video, and next thing you know, the Attorney General for New York State launched an investigation because of that video.
Oh my gosh!
So again, these are the.
How did he even come across? I mean,
because that's how viral
amazing.
This video went.
Okay.
I mean, I have people reach out for me from like Japan, China, when some of these videos go up
because
they get posted around the world.
Yeah.
So and let it also be known that Subway Creatures is not just New York, even though that's where a majority of the content comes from. It's an international page. It could be Chicago, the BART in San Francisco. It could be the Underground in London.
Okay.
Russia has a train system.
Right.
You know, so it doesn't have to just be
but
New York.
most of the content is
most
coming
of the content,
from New York.
I mean, yeah, when you have a subway system
This-
that is, 8 million people are
Popular.
taking, it's going to be where most of your content's coming from.
Where would you say like other content that's not New York related coming from as well? Like
Chicago's pretty big.
Chicago.
Obviously being a huge city. The underground that's what they call the subway system in London. I used to get stuff from there because there was another account doing similar similar stuff out there, but they just stopped one day. They just stopped doing it, and I stopped getting content from them. But I looking at the demographics and social media gives you all that stuff. You can definitely see, for some reason, I have no idea, I am huge in Mexico.
Oh my God,
I couldn't
no
even
way.
tell you why.
What?
I have no idea why.
Oh my goodness. Where in Mexico specifically? Like
it doesn't say. It just says Mexico,
Okay.
and that there is a huge following down there.
You know Spanish?
I don't. I think I'm going to have to learn Spanish.
Right.
It's like I would love to go down there and just find out what is going on. I think what may have happened was there was a very popular website down there that wound up doing basically a story on the page.
Okay.
And it just wound up bringing in a ton of followers. And Mexico is so heavily populated that it just wound up, all of a sudden taking a huge chunk out of the following.
Okay.
But
well, if you need a translator, I speak Spanish, so let me know.
I might need to use you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I had another question, and this was in regards to, given that Subway Creatures is so big, it's spawned so many other accounts that are not 100% similar to it, but they include, I'm going to name some, right?
Yeah.
Like Subway Hands.
Yes.
Subway Doodles or Doodle, Mr. NYC Subway. Are you aware of all these accounts, and do you collaborate with them?
I do actually, especially Mr. Subway NYC.
Okay.
I've hired him as a photographer to do like a calendar shoot thing that we were doing. And then we wound up actually becoming best friends.
What?
So I know him. He actually lives down the street from me in Harlem.
You live in Harlem?
I live in Harlem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last time I heard it was Hell's Kitchen.
Hell's Kitchen. Like I said though, I've been moving around.
Okay.
As the cost of rent keeps going up, you
100%.
have to keep moving with the spots. I've been everywhere. I've been Upper West, Upper East, Hell's Kitchen.
What about boroughs?
Boroughs? It's only been Manhattan, to
really?
be honest with you.
Okay.
But that's who knows down the road, But those other accounts, I did a podcast with a guy named New York Nico.
Okay.
Who also is a big fixture
as
in
well,
New York.
But he's not Subway, right?
Right. He's kind of all over New York. I really appreciate what he does. But we did a podcast, and he had me and Subway Hands on together. So I wound up meeting the girl who runs that account.
Subway Hands.
Yeah.
Oh, Subway Hands. Okay.
Which is you want to talk about niche. That's
a niche.
On the subway, and that's just hands. Like, that's crazy.
It's like a fetish, right?
Yeah, in a way it kind of is.
Like,
but she makes it artistic in a way, I have no idea if these accounts were started because of me, but I have because of the world that we live, the industry. I have met a number of these people who run these accounts, and I appreciate what they do. And there's actually been people who have, and this is partly why I was verified on social media, was people started doing Subway Creatures Berlin, Subway Creatures, like honestly all over around the country. And what they would do was they would start using all of my content to try and start their page.
Okay.
And I was like, come on, like you really have to use the name.
Okay.
Like, good luck, but you could have probably used a different name.
Right.
Because now what happens is that my friends and family see Subway Creatures elsewhere, and they think, oh, Rick started a new page.
Right. It's like it's losing a bit of your identity to other places when in fact you are, kind of your own.
So that's why I think the verification badge definitely helps a lot. But there were some of these spin-offs that started, without me even knowing, and I just kind of found out through the grapevine.
Right. Okay. Now, in regards to, I know you do a lot of things with the community. One, working with
Yes.
NYPD.
Yeah.
You do pop-ups, right? You also work a lot with musicians. Tell me everything that's going on with Rick outside of Subway Creatures related to Subway Creatures.
So it definitely, the pop-up shows have, I just started doing those. So I did them I started the first one a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
so what do the pop-up shows entail?
The pop-up shows entail, and the record labels reach out to me, and usually it's when an artist has a single dropping or an album dropping, and they want to get the word out there.
Musicians,
correct. Sorry. So then the first example was like Hozier.
Oh, wow.
So so Columbia Records reached out. They're like, listen, we got Hozier going down to the subway. Mm-hmm. He's going to do a few songs. We're kind of doing this with or without you. But we want to make sure that it gets on the page. Giving you an
exclusive.
We want to make sure it gets on the page. So I was like, oh my God. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Not knowing that he was going to be as amazing as he was.
Wow.
So I went down there, I shot all 3 videos, put one on the account. Mm-hmm. And this dude was like, he put on a show that was better than like the recording.
Concert.
It sounded better than his recording.
Wow. Okay.
And that just proved how talented he was. Mm-hmm. And then, so when I posted that, I think a lot of other record labels saw how effective this was, mm-hmm. because that was, he had an album dropping that week, and he was competing against Kanye.
Wow.
And he wound up getting number 1.
What?
And I'm not,
you totally helped him.
It definitely helped. It definitely helped because what happened was, this video, Spotify, iTunes, they all picked up the videos, mm-hmm. saying like, and he did it on, he was the one who was so talented, mm-hmm. that it spoke for itself.
Right.
But it went all, and Hozier is from the UK, so it was even bigger over there. And all of a sudden now,
you get a following
on top of it. Subway Creatures is kind of attached to the name because of what he was doing. So it really improved my following as well. But then the record labels were like, wait a second, this is big. So then, mm-hmm. Another one reached out to me, and then I started saying, okay, you know what, this is a thing. Mm-hmm. I need to do this. Mm-hmm. So I started reaching out to all of my contacts in the music industry and saying, hey, here's an example of what I did with Hozier. Right. You can get your client and we can do this. So we started doing them. I think I've done maybe 5 or 6 since then.
That's cool.
Another thing that I'm trying to do is space those out. Mm. I don't, you don't want to, pile all of them up in 1 week. So mm-hmm. you try to, space them out a little bit so people don't start being like, all right, we get it, But they've been proving really effective.
Oh, that's awesome.
For, not only my page, but mm-hmm. also for the artist. Mm. The feedback is, for the most part, it's good. The comment section, you're never going to get.
There's always people.
There's always going to be those people. But it's really been going well. And as long as they keep reaching out, mm-hmm. I'll keep doing them. And it's just another thing that's original content, mm-hmm. that, is a way to add to the page,
right.
and at the same time make some money out of it.
Absolutely. There's so much potential.
Absolutely.
Now, I can sit and talk with you all day, but I want to eventually go into tips for, navigating the subway a lot more easier for people who are new to New York.
Yep.
But my last question for you is, where are you seeing the future of Subway Creatures?
So right now I'm working on a television pilot.
What?
And by working on that, we're also, it's kind of up in the air right now, because there's a couple different directions we could go with
mm-hmm. Is there a specific person you're working with, for like a network or anything particular? I know you used to be, you were in talks with Al Roker's entertainment company.
So we were, I met with him. He's the nicest guy. He was all on board with mm-hmm. it. We did pitch it originally as almost like a podcast kind of show. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we got far with a couple of networks.
Okay.
But in the end, they wound up passing because what they also want is a large name attached to it. Mm. So, and they don't want to do the work. So they're like, well, you're going to have to find our Nick Cannon to host it. And I'm like, okay, I don't know that I have that.
Rick
Yeah.
McGuire could do it.
Well, I'm not the type person where I feel like I have to be attached mm-hmm. to the project. Like, yeah, you can make me an executive producer. I don't have to be on camera.
Right, 100%.
We can definitely bring someone in who's more professional in front of a camera, but that was part of it. They didn't want to do any of the legwork as far as finding the talent. And I'm like, well, I only have a certain reach. I can't just call up Nick Cannon and get him to come on and do this project with us. So that kind of fell through the cracks, unfortunately. But what we're doing now is kind of retooling it a little bit, altering it just to kind of try something different.
Right.
And that's as far as I could get into it right now.
That's so exciting, though.
But there's that. I'm always looking for new ways to either make original content. These pop-up shows are just now starting to take off.
Right.
So hopefully, I would love if this just turned into like a thing where, now all the time when an artist is in town, they're going to go do the Colbert Show, Saturday Night Live, and they're going to swing by the subway for Subway Creatures to do a pop-up show.
Oh my gosh.
Because the other good part about those pop-up shows is that they're pretty raw.
So people can come to them.
Anyone can come to them.
Okay.
Sometimes the artist, the musician wants to put out a blast on social media saying, hey, come, we're doing this today. Sometimes they want it to be spontaneous and they don't want anyone to know.
That's amazing.
Sometimes that's even better.
Yeah.
So anyone can come to them. Honestly, what we do is, and when I say raw and authentic, is in some cases, there's not a mic. It's just them vocally singing. There, you could hear trains honking and driving through the background, which is kind of cool. Yeah. And there's not anywhere to plug an outlet in, so it's all acoustic, and so it sounds
raw.
It's raw. It sounds better. And if you're a musician who can sing, you shouldn't have a problem with that anyway. So. And I haven't so far. I mean, these musicians coming on and doing these have been great.
That's so amazing. You have an incredible amount of great things going on. I mean, Subway Creatures, the revamp of the podcast coming soon.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So 100%. And then you have What is New York and television. There's so much potential. And I'm so happy you dropped a lot of this news here with me. So thank you so much, Rick.
Absolutely.
I love to kind of just transfer now into just asking some questions regarding
the
Subway.
Let's do it. Yeah.
They're going to be the most, just basic question, because at the end of the day, this podcast has the intention to continue enriching the lives of New Yorkers, but also those that are looking to move here, right? So there's like a lot of things that the Subway could just be overwhelming for them. So so we're gonna start. Let me actually, I got a list here. So
shoot.
So we're gonna play like a little game where you'll just answer true or false.
Gotcha.
Okay. So this will just be for general tips regarding the Subway. So the first question is: the first public New York subway line opened in 1904. True or false?
I'm gonna. This is tough because I know the subway was created in 1903, but I didn't know if that necessarily meant that it was opened yet. So I'm gonna say false because I'm gonna say 1903.
Okay. Well, then you would know. So I mean,
I didn't know if you had the answers to. I'm sitting here.
It is 1904.
I'm so scared right now because I'm like,
you know the answer. No, you know the answer. It's 1904. Technically, I just went to the New York Transit Museum, and that's what was posted. So it's true. But I was going to go with you.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So the next one.
So it's true for that one.
True.
It was true.
It's true.
Okay.
1904. Yes. The voice, the next question, the voice of the subway guy who says, "Stand clear of the closing doors, please," is named Charlie Pellet.
That I know is true.
Do you?
Yes.
How do you know that? It is true.
So once again, my friend New York Nico actually met him.
Really?
And had him record. He did a video with him.
Okay.
Of him doing "Stand clear of the closing doors, please."
Really?
And it was like, it was really cool hearing that.
Okay.
And so the guy's actually kind of a legend in New York.
He's a New Yorker too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be so curious to know more about him.
I do. He was one of the people I was. Well, we'll get down that road with the next part of the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got that one. You're 1 for 2. Which is okay. If losing your subway card, you'll be charged $2 for a replacement.
False.
Why?
It's $1.
It is $1.
Yes.
So you got that right. It's $1. So if you need to refill it and you forgot it, you're going to be charged an extra dollar. So don't lose that card. That's the point there. So there's several options for commuters riding the subway. There's a single ride, which is $2.75. There's a 7-day pass, which is $33, and there's a monthly unlimited ride pass, which is $127. Is this true or false?
That sounds true.
Just like the numbers are adding up, like, you know.
I'm doing quick mathematics because honestly, I can't buy an unlimited.
What do you use?
I don't, believe it or not, I don't ride the subway enough in one day to warrant an unlimited.
Okay.
So I just keep refilling with like $40, you know? So I'm just trying to picture the numbers that are out there.
But it's true. You're right. You did say true, right?
Yes.
So you're right. And in regards to, you know, using the refill versus the 33-day, 7-day one,
right.
you almost, if you're using it a lot, if you're using it 4 times a day, right? Because you got to go somewhere, come back. And if you go somewhere and come back again, that's already $10. And if you 3 days in a row, you're already equating those $33 to the 7-day pass. So it's almost cheaper, right? Like you're saving money that way. And then, but yes.
Wow, you really did your homework.
No, well, I mean, I want to
get. For someone who's a brand new New Yorker, you really did your homework.
Thank you. I really.
This is good.
I want people to know the things that they should know. I don't want them to struggle when they get here, right? It's like, it's not easy navigating the subway.
It's not.
When I first started here, the whole thing was, I didn't even know which way was uptown or downtown. I was like, where the hell am I? How does someone navigate that? Like, what advice do you give to that?
So the best advice for that, it's very hard for anyone. I'm a New Yorker, and I even still get turned around, especially when I'm down in like the village, because the New York City runs on a grid system for the most part. So even numbers run west to east, and the odds are the exact opposite, east to west.
Okay.
So that's one way of knowing kind of where you're facing. Another thing when you come out of the subway is kind of referencing buildings. I think that helps a lot too.
Like landmarks?
Like Empire State Building or Freedom Tower, knowing which direction it is, you know that the Freedom Tower is one of the most southern points of Manhattan. You know, if depending on where you are in Manhattan, you know that Empire State Building is kind of midtown. So looking for landmarks is definitely a plus too.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you. I think how I ended up figuring it out is, Harlem, the Bronx is uptown, right? So the train's going to say uptown, and Brooklyn, World Trade Center is downtown. So just kind of think of it as well in that sense, right?
Yeah, you could definitely do that as well. And then one other thing that people get confused, streets are the short ones, avenues are the very long ones. So when you're walking, I know that might sound a little confusing too, but
it will, but you'll get it after a while.
Yeah, you'll definitely pick up on it after a while.
Okay. Thank you for that. That was great advice. You can swipe your 7-day Metro card and monthly pass every 30 minutes. Only every 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's true.
Is it true?
Wait, no,
I think I read it wrong. You can only swipe your 7-day Metro card and monthly pass every 30 minutes. Yeah, that's how I wrote it.
That's...
I think I'm saying it wrong.
Because you can, here, I'll kind of explain where my head's at. Once you swipe and maybe we're saying the same thing here. Once you swipe your unlimited or your 7-day, there's a 30-minute period before you're allowed to swipe it again.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So is your answer true or false?
So that is true.
It is, but it's false because it's 18 minutes.
Oh,
I tricked you on this. Yeah, it's 18 minutes. So
30 sounded good.
I know, right? But no, it's actually a pain in the sense that if you're
I'm so bad at this.
No, you're not. You got this. I've heard you say all this before.
I know, that's even worse.
It's just the way I'm asking it. So just for reference in regards to what we're talking about. So if you buy a 7-day Metro pass and you swipe it for yourself, and then you have, say, a significant other with you and you want to just, slide it back to them for them to swipe, it's not going to go through because it won't allow it until every 18 minutes. So
there are some restrictions to an unlimited. Exactly.
Yeah, they're smart in how they built that. So,
but you are allowed to transfer.
Yes. The transfers, always.
The transfers are good.
And never worry about the transfers because they're just like a hop away, right?
They're a hop away, but I mean and I have to do this, taking the subway and then having to get on a bus. If you have an unlimited, as soon as you get off the subway, immediately when you go up to get on the bus, you can still get on and it won't
Thank you. That was my next question. It literally says right here, your subway card can also be used for the local New York City buses.
See, there you go. Absolutely.
You got it.
Yeah.
And that's a question that I didn't even have. Like, I didn't know it.
You see, we're all learning here.
So it's true. It's true, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like
Great.
it. There's takeaway on this podcast.
Amazing. Okay. We're almost there. Lastly, the Q train is one of the subway tracks above ground where you can see the Brooklyn Bridge and the Statue of Liberty when riding it into Brooklyn from Manhattan.
That is true.
It is true.
Yes.
It is true. It's a nice
view. Every time you ask the question, I'm thinking of like each landmark, whether that was like true or not. And
okay.
I think that's true.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's a great one for anyone who's new, right?
Yeah, it's also one of the newest lines as well.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it just finished a couple years ago.
That I didn't know.
Yeah,
okay.
Upper East Side.
Well, thank you for answering that, Rick.
Absolutely.
And it looks like I'm just going to ask you 3 more questions. We'll wrap this up because I think we've gone over the hour. Okay, so if someone's new to the city and they're going to navigate the subway system, what's the biggest advice you'd give to them?
The biggest advice would be try, if you can, to use some of the larger stations that have access to almost all the trains, which are Times Square. Union Square is a popular one if you're in Brooklyn, Atlantic Ave. But there's also, and I'm not getting paid to say this, there's an app called Pigeon.
Okay.
Which is basically, have you ever heard of Waze?
Of course, yeah.
So this is the Waze of Subway.
Really?
It tells you subway lines up to the minute, and it's crowdsourced.
It's like a Google Map too,
Basically, it's Google Map. It's the same thing, but it's specific. It's only in New York City as of right now. So
that's a great tip.
That's a great app that I actually use.
Okay.
And I highly recommend it.
Thank you for that. 1 through 10, would you consider the New York subway system safe? You can't say 7.
1 through
10. 1 through 10. Let's go 1 through 10. Is the New York subway safe?
I'm gonna go with yes, and a number. I would say 6 because it also depends on where you are and when you're there.
Okay.
But listen,
that's a good realistic.
The NYPD does a pretty good job. They've even when it comes to terrorism, they've thwarted a bunch of stuff. So it's good. And then just for security reasons, again, it depends on where you are and when you are. You don't want to be in certain places after a certain time, and it wouldn't even matter. But I would say for the most part, it is. The most part, you don't hear a lot of horror stories. So
Okay. So they're not going to get all that stuff we talked about earlier. It's just more.
No, you're actually, if you come here as a tourist, you're going to have trouble finding subway creatures sometimes.
Okay.
Unless you check those stations out I mentioned.
Thank you. Okay. So I just kind of want to leave off here on, just saying some last words. Please be sure to go follow Rick over at Subway Creatures on Instagram and be on the lookout for all the new projects he has going, as well as go follow What is New York on Instagram. Absolutely. And, visit the MTA official website just to get more of these specific details. Yeah. I'm pretty sure everything we said here was correct. And, have you ever been to the New York Transit Museum?
No, it's on my list, though. Okay. Definitely got to get down there.
So that's one thing I want to promote. I just recently went. There's so much knowledge, there's so much history. It's pretty amazing. And Rick, I want to leave you with something. When I was at the New York Transit Museum, I didn't get to speak to the marketing and the PR, but I did speak to someone from there, an official from there, and I asked if you have heard of Subway Creatures, and she said if her and coworkers have heard of Subway Creatures, and she said yes, 100%, absolutely. They all think the content is so funny and amazing, and it's so great that it exists. There's a lot of odd things happening out there in the subway that needs to be documented, so much so that it should have its own exhibition.
Oh my God, that's
so
great.
That was all for you, Rick.
I need to get down there.
Yeah.
I need to talk to these people.
Absolutely. Well, you've been doing amazing with what you have been doing. And I thank you so much for coming on this podcast.
Thank you.
And
absolutely.
Please stay in touch. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Gossipnista. Your support means the world. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends. Can't wait till next week's episode? Follow along on Instagram at Gossipnista to get my latest New York happenings. But if you live and breathe New York City like I do and want even more, go to our website at gossipnista.com, explore, and subscribe to our newsletter to get insider tips first. Lastly, if you have any questions and or scoop on the city, you can email me at gossipnista@gmail.com. Until next time, you know you love me. XOXO, Gossipnista.